Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to the dev server again, and this time I have all the stats. Some of the stats have changed, the tanks are now fully upgraded, I have them, so big thanks to Gaijin for giving me some few gold needles, 250,000, and I needed 70,000 of them to get all the new tanks, excluding the premiums. However, I will focus here on the M1 Abrams, the Leopard 2K, the T-64B, the Challenger 1 and the MX-30 Brennus. So, what are the tanks about? What has changed and so forth should be mentioned here. I will make it as briefly as possible and show you the stat cards later on at the end. Gameplay makes no sense whatsoever to fight against World War II bots. It doesn't make any sense to show what the tanks are capable of, but they are really nice to drive, a little bit like in arcade, but that is due to the horsepower to ton ratio, especially on the M1 Abrams and the Leopard 2K. And yeah, let's begin with it. Again, don't forget, everything is subject to change. So let's begin with the M1 Abrams, and we can see that we have a relatively thin outer metal skin. But don't let yourself fool, because there is some internal armor, composite armor as well, and that shall we see now. So the lower plate, or the front plate of the M1 Abrams, is here protected by 380mm against kinetic energy ammunition. That's putting some of the AP FSDS rounds to the test, especially when you have a bit more angling going on and not the fully upgraded ammunition. Also, I'm not quite sure if 400mm of APDS will go through, and against heat or any sort of chemical energy ammunition, 600mm, that is kind of right at the, not quite at the edge, but just against some it will not deliver the protection that the tank needs. However, the sides here, there are as well the fuel tanks and some additional internal rolled homogeneous armor, and that might just be enough to make the actual hit area for heat ammunition relatively small, just a third of the hitting area. But this front here, well, it's down to the oh, sorry about this, it's about the angling, and that might ricochet some of the ammunition, but it also might go through. Well, 82 degrees, that's pretty hefty for an angle. But then again, we have this part here with the turret ring, and there is no protection. So again, this part here as well, 380 against kinetic and 600 against chemical energy ammunition. The area around the gun breech is thinner, but not that thin. However, it is also having the cannon breech behind it, so that might neglect some of the damage to go through. Side of the turret as well, pretty well protected, and some internal armor and ammunition, and there it also has the blowout function. I cannot sadly show you this because it's the dev server. When the tank will come out, I will give you a tank review, and there's also a new mechanic. And you should remove this ammunition and this ammunition, as all the ammunition automatically goes in the back of the turret after a while with the new reload mechanism. So yeah, it has the smallest caliber gun, but with some of the fastest reload out there, with 5.0 seconds for an ace crew. The full statistics later on. Let's move on to the ammunition, and we can see a good surprise. The stock shell 360mm AP FSDS. That is good. That is good. And you know, AP FSDS is better than APDS, especially against sloped armor in general. But it's not an absolute monstrous killer shell. The hash shell is more or less useless, and it's a tier 1 upgrade. You might bypass it because you also have stock the heat FS shell with 400mm of penetration, and that is kind of a game changer, because then you need the hash shell not that often, because mostly you would need some hash for some side shots, granted that, but also to hull break certain vehicles, and you can do this with the heat shell as well, as far as I know. So not the most urgent upgrade when it comes to the hash shell. Then we also have a smoke shell as a tier 2 upgrade, and as a tier 4 upgrade, the APFSDS, which is the M774. That is strong, but it's a tier 4 upgrade, and yeah, the ammunition cost is there. It's not monstrous, but still there. I wouldn't bother personally because I rely on performance and not price. And yeah, so that gives you an impression about the M1 Abrams. Let's move on finally to the Leopard 2K. It's a beautiful tank with a very strong 120mm and also a 20mm Rheinmetall or RH202 cannon. By the way, I don't know if you noticed it, but when you switch the nations, the music changes. And now it's some classical German music, I guess. I'm not an expert on this. Dum da da dum 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 da da dum 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 da da dum. Well, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's begin with the armor. Again, very or relatively thin outer metal skin, not very competitive. The side armor as well, very thin, actually 12mm, 22, 30. It's a Leopard 1 chassis after all, bit modified. Turret is longer, really long. Weak on the side, just 16mm. But again, we have some internal armor or some, you know, spaced armor. The fuel tank here protects here the ammo rack in the front. You could take out a lot of the shells. This ammo rack here gets refilled, and the spaced armor here is a bit weird from the gun downwards on the turret front, but some big gaps here. And then we have as well some spaced armor here on the side, but it's not really that much. It's literally a glass cannon. We have also some armor protecting here against the ammunition cook-off of the 20mm, which is, by the way, very useful. And we have some spaced armor on the back of the engine. Don't ask me why, I just work here. Well, for free. Then let's talk about the ammunition, and this is what this tank really surprises me, because this very, very strong DM12 HEAT-FS shell with 650mm penetration that melts literally nearly through everything, well, it's the stock round. It's very powerful, and because you have the 20mm, you can remove bushes, fences, even some trees or some wooden obstacle like carports, and then work on the enemy tank with this very powerful HEAT-FS shell that also has some pretty strong post-penetration damage effect. And as a tier 1 upgrade, you get the DM13 with 417mm of penetration and very fast, 1650 meters per second. So that means this tank is relatively stock grind friendly. However, you need obviously the filters, transmission and engine to make the most out of the maneuverability and speed of the tank, which is the main selling point, firepower and mobility, not so much armor. But again, this changes a lot when you're used to the Leopard 1 or the Leopard A1A1, which heavily rely on the stock grind, or well, suffer from it. Talking about the Leopard A1A1, let me just show you this. It also got now the DM23 APFSDS shell with 385mm of penetration. So how this exactly will work, I don't know, but it's a definite upgrade compared to the stock DM13 APDS round. So more penetration, more post-penetration damage effect. You can use the tank now as a backup vehicle. So it might struggle against a few opponents, but now against, you know, not the top tier predators, it has a very mean punch. And with this shell here, the DM23, you can definitely work against a lot more tanks compared to this. So some of the Soviet heavy tanks, IS-3, IS-4, T-10M, and even the T-54-47 if you still meet them. So yeah, definite upgrade, but sadly a tier 4. So yeah, I don't know. Now let's go on. Let's move on to the Soviets with the T-64B 1984. And this tank really looks nice. The most distinguishing feature from the T-64A are the combat flaps. I mean the side panels. Yeah, I saw the meme on War Thunder Live as well. Combat flaps, no combat flaps. So, the camouflage is really nice. The tank looks awesome. What about the armor? Well, it's not nothing steel-wise. And it has some spaced armor here. The sight is here 85mm thick on the front part and 70 where the engine sits. The rear is a bit thinner as usual, I guess. Back of the turret, we have some armor radiation material. I guess it's lead or some composite lead stuff. And the turret roof is here with I guess 45mm, not nothing, but the engine deck just 20. What about the internal armor or the composite armor? Pretty strong, 440 against kinetic energy ammunition, so that puts a lot, I mean almost all of the APFSTS rounds from the non-Russian nations to the test. However, it also has the lower plate being exposed, and there are also to the sides of the driver the fuel tanks, but no additional internal armor like on the M1 Abrams, so this is your best chance. And we also have here the 150 to 303mm of cost homogeneous armor as internal armor. I'm not quite sure if this is additional to the 330 and 150mm. It looks like another representation of the outer armor, but it doesn't really matter because after the gaps there is the massive cannon breach that might reduce a lot of the going through damage. And then we have also this composite armor that again ranges from 400 to 450mm of protection. But believe me, the very nasty heat-fest shell from the Leopard's 120mm Rheinmetall L44 will go through and blow up the tank. So there is the armor. Again, there is also some side of the turret. So don't shoot the turret, shoot the hull. It gives you the better chances. And there's a lot of ammunition everywhere. Just aim under the turret and you will hit propellant charges, warheads and whatnot. So let's talk about the ammunition of the T-64B, and surprise surprise, the stock shell is the strongest APFSTS that there is in the game so far as of now. The 3BM15 features 440mm of penetration with nearly 1800 meters per second muzzle velocity, but it doesn't seem to have the best normalization, but against most allied tanks it works fine. And then we also have, as a tier 1 upgrade, the 3BK12M with 440mm of penetration, which is nice, but the muzzle velocity of obviously is not the highest with 900 meters per second as a tier 1 upgrade. Maybe to hull break stuff, but it really depends how it works out. Then as a tier 3 upgrade, we feature the 9M112 ATGM with 650mm of penetration, and that matches the penetration of the HEAT-FS shell of the Leopard. So this shows you how strong those both shell types are. And as an ATGM, what we need to know how fast it is. With 400 meters per second, it's one of the fastest ATGMs out there, if not the fastest. I have to check that on later if this goes live. Again, everything is subject to change. But a range of 5 kilometers, well, you can shoot practically everywhere where it's possible to even see the enemy. You might surprise a lot of the planes that's coming at you. We'll see how you can aim with it. 14 degrees of gun elevation is not the strongest, but we'll see how it goes. So then also as a tier 4 upgrade is the 3BM22 with 475mm of penetration. If I'm not wrong, this is by quite some bit the strongest APFSTS round in the game so far, with also nearly 1800 meters. seems just to be an improved version of the 3BM15, but both shell types don't have positive normalization. But then again, I don't know how much you can trust the stat card here when it comes to AP FSTS, the penetration mechanisms, the values, and some hidden modifiers. We will have to test that. And that belongs to all AP FSTS rounds, by the way. So yeah, the heat shell, just forget about it. So yeah, that's the T64B. That seems to be maybe the best all-around package that you can get for the new top tier tanks. Then let's talk about the British, the Challenger 1, and it has received some love. So first of all, this is a camouflage that you can purchase or unlock. I think it looks dope. And let's have a look at the armor. So the frontal plate, still not the thickest and relatively flat. Then also the upper hull with some nice angling, but not the strongest of steel armor. But it doesn't really matter, it's just the outer hull. This 60mm and another 60mm on the driver's port is nasty because there is no composite armor, and also the 200mm here are around the gun mantle or the gun mantle itself. Third front 50mm, side is relatively thin, 20-25, and yeah, here we also have 25mm. Let's see how it is on the X-ray, and we can see the same old issue like on the first iteration. It seems to be historically accurate. Lower plate is just a bullet magnet. There are some SPAs that will punch right through it from the front. This means this tank needs some hull down because there is no fuel tanks but ammunition. Good design, well done British. And jokes aside, the upper part is strong. 400mm against kinetic energy ammunition and 600 against chemical energy ammunition. So add a bit of angling or some hull down, you know, use of 10 degrees of gun depression, and you might create some ricochets. But just under the gun there's this big hole that's really nasty, but it doesn't necessarily hit anything ammunition wise or so forth. And the turret, really strong, 480mm and 750mm against chemical energy ammunition. So even the T64B with the upgraded AP FSTS, or even the Raketenjagdpanzer 2 Hot with the Hot missile, they might see some problems against this tank, at least on the turret. Add to this again the 10 degrees of gun depression, a bit of range, a bit of angling, I don't know, and you know, this tank will be a really great hull down monster, at least from the front. And yeah, it doesn't have the best mobility out there, but it's definitely better than the Chieftain. So again, the stats, I will show them later on. So on the side we have some fuel tanks, some additional composite armor protecting the side of the turret, and a lot of ammunition here. Especially here some additional ammunition protection, or the ammunition serves as additional ammunition behind the turret. I don't know, let's just see the funny side. Yeah, so let's have a look at the ammunition, and this is where the Challenger, the shot L15A5 is an APDS round. Yes, it's a bit better by 12mm. How effective it effectively will be on the live server, if it receives any changes at all, I don't know. But APDS against the majority of tanks that you will face, with the exception of the Leopard 2K, it might struggle. It really might struggle a lot. The hash shell, again, useless against all the spaced and composite armor. It will not help you really, but it's for free, so to hull break stuff, to damage gun barrels, or to just try your best with side shots if you have the opportunity, maybe. It's for free, no harm done. And then as a tier 2 upgrade, the shot L23 with 410mm of penetration, 1500 meters per second muzzle velocity, Kind of decent normalization, but it's not a magic shell. This is kind of the limit of the 120mm L11A5. It shows the age from the chieftains, at least in my books. The shot was unreliable. In the test drives, in the few battles that I played, I don't trust this shell, let's put it that way. And that's a tier 2 upgrade that you need. And as a tier 4 upgrade, the shot L23A1 with 440mm of penetration and decent normalization, and also around about 1500 meters per second muzzle velocity. It seems a bit more reliable, but it also created some weird bounces and non-penetrations. Don't ask me, might be just a test server, we will see how it works out, but the stock run on this tank is just nasty. And then at the end, obviously we need to have a look at the MX-30B2 Brennus. The armor, nothing special. I don't get some satisfying values on the era. I don't think that they just offer 120mm of protection against heat additional. The hull itself, thin. Turret has lacks some era protection from the front at certain points, but it has a coaxial 20mm. Side is thin, so your typical main battle tank. It doesn't have a stabilizer, and internally there is also no spaced armor, as you can see, except maybe the fuel tank, but behind that there are the ammo racks and also the back of the turret, beautifully arranged ammunition. So yeah, then let's have a look at the ammunition. And the OCC 105F1 now has 10% increased of penetration to 400mm with 1000 meters per second muzzle velocity. I've not tested this, but it's just a heat shell, and yeah, you will see a lot of up tiers to 8.7. The lack of excellent mobility, and also the lack of a stabilizer and the lack of frantic reload, let's put it that way, really puts a dent into this tank's well, appearance on the battlefield, I'd say. And better than nothing, that's it. Forget about the heat shell. Smoke shell is a tier 1 upgrade, I'm not quite sure, but as a tier 2 upgrade, the OFL 105F1 with 348mm of penetration seems a bit subpar, but it has positive normalization. So we'll see how it works out. More testing has to be done. Again, everything is subject to change. This might just be able to deal with the T64A. About the B, I'm not quite so sure how reliable it is. But again, lower plate, post-penetration effect, muzzle velocity, it's there. The stock run is there, but it's not extremely annoying, let's put it that way. Again, with the exception of lack of mobility or excellent mobility and lack of a stabilizer. So those are the new tanks. And now let's have a look at the statistics. So while we enjoy some Abrams gameplay and later on some Leopard 2 gameplay here on the dev server, you know, against bots, let's talk about the statistics, and let's begin with the firepower department, so the gun handling, rate of fire and so forth. Now we have here with the Abrams the smallest gun in conjunction, or together rather, with the MX-30B2 Brennus, and I will also compare it to the older T64A and Kampfpanzer 70 stats, though, so that you know where we are coming from. So on the Abrams, the 105mm M68A1 cannon with the hugest amount of shells actually fires every 5.0 seconds up until the ready ammo rack is depleted. How big this ready ammo rack is for each tank seems to change, and then it goes up by around about 50%. So after that you fire every 7.5 seconds in the case of the M1 Abrams, like with the Kampfpanzer Leopard 2K, which has also 5.0 second for a 120mm gun. The T-64B has a longer reload, and in amongst the new tanks, the longest with 7.1 for an ace crew. However, this is an autoloader, so it has this reload all the time. And as far as I can tell, doesn't have this radar rack, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, but it's 42% longer reload compared to the optimal rate of fire on the Abrams and the Leopard 2K. And the Challenger 1 together with the MX-30B2 Brenners have 6.7 seconds for an ace crew. The turret rotation speed again on the Abrams and the Leopard 2K is 40 degrees per second each, followed by the Challenger with 31 and the MX-30 with 30. But then the last of the pack is the T-64B with 24 seconds, but that's still 4 seconds faster than its predecessor, the T-64A. But still, 24, it's not that bad, it's just bad in comparison. And then also the gun depression obviously is the best with the M1 Abrams and the Challenger 1, followed by the Leopard, and at the end we see both the T-64B and also the T-64A. The IMX Brenners has the -8 degrees. Then throughout the pack we have 20 degrees of gun elevation, except 14 degrees for the T-64s. The elevation speed is something really strange, and yeah, 24 degrees per second elevation for the M1 Abrams is best in class, except of course with the exception of the Kampfpanzer 70 with 25, but you know, that's an older tank. The Kampfpanzer Leopard 2K still has 20 degrees, and then it dips really down, like just a tenth for the T-64B of 2.5 seconds, but you tend to not really notice that when we talk here about the stabilizer. So it really hurts the MX-30B2 Brennus with just 5.5 degrees per second. But throughout War Thunder 4 degrees per second is kind of the standard, so it's not the worst out there. But again, if you meet the opposition with stabilizer, high rate of fire, better mobility, and also better gun elevation speed, you kind of see where this tank might struggle. And yeah, the T-64B kind of here, I don't know if you're outside of the range of the stabilizer, I don't know how to play around it, but this gun elevation speed is just horrible, horrible, horrible. Now let's move on to the mobility statistics. So here we see the M1 Abrams having the strongest engine with 1590 horsepower with a 54.4 weight of tonnage. We have nearly 28 horsepower per ton ratio. That's close to the KPZ 70. And then also the Kampfpanzer Leopard 2K has 30 horsepower per ton flat out. And you really feel it with those two tanks. They just zoom around on the battlefield. It's absolutely insane. I mean, look at this. That's a nice jump. Nearly uncontrollable, but I haven't experienced this behavior even with Hellcats in arcade. So that tells you quite something. Really, really powerful engines, really fast tanks. However, the response is just a bit too sluggish for my taste when it comes to how powerful the tanks are in a straight line or something. It really shows itself when you switch from forward to reverse gear, and you really have to train it while brake it to manually shift the gears to have the best response possible. That is really feelable. It's not that bad, but in comparison to how the tanks just move around, it's absolutely ludicrous. And then we see this big drop off when we come to the T-64B 1984. Under 18 horsepower per tons, that's approaching just half of the horsepower to ton ratio of the Leopard 2K. And also the top speed reflects it a little bit. But the Challenger is a bit weird. It's close to 20 horsepower per ton ratio, but with the top speed it's limited. However, due to how it plays out, it's always very close to the top speed. And the MX 30 B2 Brennus must be mentioned here. Nearly also 20 horsepower per ton ratio. Decent top speed of 65 kilometers an hour, but it, yeah, again, it doesn't make up. And I expect this tank to have a lot of up tiers, so kind of bad. And then the top speeds, of course, Abrams and Leopard 2K on the top, followed by the T64 and the MX-30 B2 Brennus, with the Challenger having the slowest forward gear. But when it comes to the reverse gear, the Abrams, at least in the test drive, was limited to minus 20 kilometers an hour, and I found no way to go above this reverse gear. The Leopard 2K seems to go as fast backwards as it goes forwards with minus 70, which gives it very good maneuverability in conjunction with the reverse gear, which every tank except the Russians have. And talking about the Russians, yeah, minus 4 kilometers an hour backwards for both the A and the B version. That is just bad. And then the Challenger surprises it all with minus 56 kilometers an hour backwards. So surprising amounts of reverse gear. And this is nice for a change, really. So yeah, the Challenger is now having a much better opportunity with maneuverability, but I still wouldn't give it the benefit of the speed compared to other tanks in the competition. So when we pick this everything or bring this all into perspective, what do we have? Well, we have the Abrams, which has good armor and good mobility, some of the best mobility out there, with a very, very fast firing gun and an AP FSDS round as stock shell. So that is a very good tank. Then there is the Leopard 2K. Not a lot of armor, if any, but great mobility and a powerful stock heat shell, which is supported by the top mounted 20mm, that you also can swat some nasty flies out of the air. So keep that in mind, that the tank offers a lot of potential. The T64B is straightforward, quite literally. Not the best mobility. The gun is also very good, offers the best penetrating capabilities out there. Best stock round, best upgraded AP FSDS round, even a very strong ATGM as upgrade, so it has everything for everybody's taste. But it will do very good stock. It's very good at pushing, good armor. The Challenger 1, some very big holes in the armor. The gun, not very convincing, especially the stock grind is horrible. Decent mobility compared to especially the predecessors, the chieftains, and nearly said the other chieftains. But yeah, to bring it into perspective, it might not be the holy grail of tanks out there. The MX-30 B2 Brennus has a lower battle rating, rightfully so. And again, if you put everything into perspective, I honestly have to ask myself why the Leopard 2K has the same battle rating as the AMX-30 B2 Brennus. It makes no sense whatsoever, and is just the pinnacle of showcase of compression. And this time, it's just a German tank that is, you know, very good at showing this. I hope that Gaijin will really rework the battle ratings. I do not really see the sense why the Leopard also has a lower battle rating than the Kampfpanzer 70. I don't know if this is just a general tendency, but it shouldn't be like this. So I hope that Gaijin will rework the battle ratings before the release. Some of the stats might change, again it's just a dev server, but it's not as much of a mess as it previously was. And with those words, that's it for me today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did. Subscribe if you want to see more. And yeah, back to grinding some silver lines, because this is gonna be an expensive patch, even for people like me. See you on the battlefields of War Thunder.